This can't be right. Did you see this clause?
I see it, but I don't believe it.
Christmas morning arrived quietly. The house looked warm and welcoming, just like it did every year. Soft lights wrapped around the tree. Wrapped gifts were stacked neatly underneath. The smell of food filled the living room, mixing with pine. From the tree. From the outside, it looked like a perfect family moment. He had woken up early that day, not because he was excited, but because he wanted everything to be right. He cleaned the living room again, even though it was already clean. He helped in the kitchen without being asked. He tried to smile, even though something inside him felt off. For weeks, he had sensed distance. His wife had been quieter than usual, short replies, long silences. She smiled at others but barely looked at him. When he asked if something was wrong, she always said the same thing, "I'm just tired." He wanted to believe her. Christmas mattered to him. Not because of gifts, but because it was one of the few days when family was supposed to feel like family. Peaceful, forgiving, safe. Her family started arriving around noon. One by one. They filled the living room. Laughter grew louder. Someone turned on music. Someone else joked about old memories. On the surface, everything felt normal. But he noticed the looks, whispers that stopped when he walked closer. Smiles that didn't reach the eyes. A few people barely greeted him. Others spoke past him as if he wasn't even there. He ignored it. He always did. He sat on the couch, hands resting on his knees, watching the tree lights flicker. He told himself he was overthinking. That Christmas stress made people act strange. Then his wife stood up. She didn't say anything at first. She reached over to the table and picked up an envelope. Plain, white, thin. The room slowly quieted. She walked toward him, calm and steady. Her face showed no anger, no sadness. "Just determination. I need you to read this," she said. Her voice was firm, but not loud. He looked at the envelope and forced a small smile. "What is it?" he asked. She didn't answer. She held it out. When he took it, he felt a strange tightness in his chest. The room felt smaller. The music had stopped. Every eye was on him now. He opened the envelope. At first, the words didn't make sense. His eyes scanned the page quickly, then slowly. Then again, that was when he saw it. The word divorce stood out, bold and undeniable. His hands froze. For a moment, he honestly thought it had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding, a cruel joke. It was Christmas Day. He looked up at her, searching her face for something, regret, hesitation, anything. There was nothing. Then it happened. Someone laughed. At first, it was just one voice, then another. Then clapping, actual clapping. He turned his head slightly and saw her family reacting, smiling, pointing, nodding at each other as if something long awaited had finally happened. One person said, "It's about time." Another added, "We all knew this would happen." Someone else laughed and said, "Merry Christmas." The words hit harder than the paper in his hands. His face burned. His ears rang. His throat tightened, but no sound came out. He felt smaller than he ever had in his life. This wasn't just a private decision. This wasn't a serious conversation behind closed doors. This was humiliation. Public, planned, celebrated. He slowly lowered his eyes back to the paper. His name looked strange on it now, like it belonged to someone else. The room waited. They expected something, anger, shouting, tears, begging. Anything. But he didn't give them that. He said nothing. He folded the paper carefully and held it in his lap. His face stayed calm, even though his heart felt like it was breaking in slow motion. His silence confused them. The laughter softened. A few people stopped smiling. His wife frowned slightly, as if she expected a reaction. "Do you have anything to say?" she asked. He looked up at her. For a second, it seemed like he might speak. Then he shook his head slowly. "No," he said quietly. He stood up, placed the folded papers on the table, and grabbed his coat. As he walked toward the door, someone scoffed. Someone else muttered, "Figures." He didn't turn back. The cold air hit his face as soon as he stepped outside. The door closed behind him, cutting off the noise, the laughter, the clapping. He stood there for a moment, breathing deeply. Christmas lights from neighboring houses flickered softly in the distance. That was when he realized something important. They thought this was the end of him, They were wrong, and they had no idea what he was about to do next. Asterisk. The cold followed him down the street. He walked without a clear direction, hands deep in his pockets, breath slow and heavy. Christmas lights lined the houses, glowing softly, mocking the chaos in his chest. Families were inside laughing, opening gifts, eating together. He was outside alone. Every step replayed the moment in his mind, the envelope, the word, the clapping, the laughter. He kept hearing it over and over, like a sound that refused to fade. What hurt the most wasn't the divorce papers, it was the way they smiled while handing them to him. He had never expected applause for his pain. He sat down on a bench a few blocks away, staring at the ground. His hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the weight of it all. He had always believed that problems should be handled quietly, with respect. Clearly, that belief wasn't shared. As he sat there, memories started coming back. Not all at once, but slowly, like pieces fitting together. He remembered the early days of their marriage. Back then, things were different. They laughed easily. They planned together. When money was tight, they supported each other. When life felt heavy, they faced it side by side. But over time, something changed. Her family became more involved in everything. Small comments at first. Advice that didn't feel like advice. Questions that felt more like judgment. Why are things still so hard? Don't you think she deserves more? You should be further along by now. He heard those words often, always wrapped in smiles. He worked long hours, sometimes 2 jobs at once. He missed gatherings, missed sleep, missed rest, not because he wanted to, but because he believed sacrifice was part of being responsible. Still, it never felt like enough. At family dinners, he became quieter. Conversations would continue without him. Jokes were shared that he wasn't part of. Decisions were made before he was even asked, and his wife, she changed too. She stopped defending him. When her family criticized him, she stayed silent. When he tried to talk about it later, she brushed it off. They don't mean anything by it, she would say. They're just worried. But worry doesn't laugh when someone is hurt, sitting on that bench. The truth finally became clear. The divorce wasn't sudden. It had been discussed, planned, approved, and today was chosen on purpose. Christmas. A room full of witnesses. A moment designed to make him feel small. His phone buzzed. A message popped up from her. We need to talk. You can't just leave like that. He stared at the screen for a long moment before locking the phone and sliding it back into his pocket. For once, he wasn't ready to talk. He wasn't angry in the way people expect anger to look. He wasn't shouting or shaking. What he felt was quieter, heavier. Disappointment. He realized something else too. They thought his silence meant weakness. They thought walking away meant he had nothing to say because he had nothing left. That wasn't true. He just refused to give them the satisfaction. After sitting there for a while, he stood up and started walking again, this time with purpose. He headed toward a small place he had stayed before during a work trip. Nothing fancy. Just quiet. When he reached the door, he paused. For the first time that day, he allowed himself to breathe deeply. Inside, the room was plain but peaceful. He sat on the bed and stared at the wall. No noise, no laughter. No judgment. Just space. That night, he didn't cry, not because he didn't want to, but because something else was happening inside him. Clarity. He began thinking about all the times he had stayed quiet to keep peace. All the times he lowered himself to avoid conflict. All the times he chose patience over pride, and he realized something important. Patience only works when there is respect on both sides. This wasn't about losing a marriage anymore. This was about reclaiming his dignity. His phone buzzed again. This time messages came in faster, from her family. Some angry, some demanding, some suddenly polite. He didn't reply to any of them. Instead, he opened his laptop. There were things he needed to review, documents, records, decisions. He had delayed for too long because he believed trust was enough. That night, while others celebrated Christmas, he quietly prepared himself. Not for revenge, for independence. They thought he walked out defeated. They had no idea. He was just getting started, and the next step he would take would change everything. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the heater. He sat at the small desk, laptop open, papers spread out in front of him. The light from the screen reflected in his tired eyes, but his mind felt clearer than it had in a long time. For years, he had avoided moments like this, not because he was careless, but because he trusted too easily. He believed love meant not keeping score. He believed marriage meant sharing everything without question. Now, sitting alone, he saw how one-sided that belief had become. He started with something simple, looking through old records. Bank statements, emails, messages, not to accuse anyone but to understand. To finally see the full picture without emotion clouding his judgment. What he found didn't shock him. It explained everything. He realized how often he had been the one carrying the weight, rent paid on time, emergency expenses handled quietly, long workdays accepted without complaint, promotions delayed because family needed stability more than ambition. He remembered the nights he came home exhausted, only to be told he wasn't present enough. The weekends he gave up to fix problems no one else wanted to deal with. The personal goals he postponed again and again. He had never kept track, but the truth was there, written clearly in numbers and dates. This wasn't about who earned more. It was about who gave more without asking for applause. As he worked through the papers, his phone lit up again. This time, a message from one of her relatives. You embarrassed her by leaving like that. He let out a slow breath. Embarrassed her. Not the public divorce announcement, not the laughter, not the cheering. His quiet exit was the problem. That message confirmed what he already knew. They never cared how he felt. He closed the laptop for a moment and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He thought about the man he used to be, always trying to prove himself, always hoping to finally be accepted. That hope had kept him stuck, and now it was gone. When he opened the laptop again, his focus shifted. This time he wasn't looking backward, he was looking forward. He reviewed agreements he had signed without reading carefully before. He noticed details he once brushed aside because he trusted words more than paper. He didn't feel anger, he felt awake. Later that night, he stepped outside for fresh air. The street was quiet. Christmas lights still blinked in windows, but they no longer bothered him. For the first time, he didn't feel like he had lost something. He felt like he had been released. Back at the house, things weren't as calm. Her family had expected him to come back. They expected arguments, tears, maybe even apologies. When hours passed with no response, irritation turned into concern. Calls went unanswered. Messages stacked up. Some were sharp. Some were suddenly soft. His wife sat staring at her phone, refreshing the screen, confused by the silence. She had rehearsed that moment so many times, how he would react, what he would say. She had never imagined this. She began to question the voices around her. The ones that told her this was the right way. The ones that said public pressure would force him to accept it quietly. Instead, it pushed him away. That thought unsettled her. Meanwhile, he made one final decision that night. He would not rush anything. No emotional texts. No public explanations. No defending himself to people who had already chosen a side. He would move slowly, carefully on his own terms. Before sleeping, he wrote a short note to himself. Just a few words. Stay calm. Stay clear. Stay silent. The next morning, he woke up early. Sunlight came through the window, soft and steady. The weight in his chest was lighter. Not gone, but manageable. He checked his phone once more. Dozens of missed calls. He turned it face down. Today wasn't about them. Today was about him. And soon, whether they liked it or not, they would understand something they never expected. His silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. And when the truth finally came out, it would speak louder than any argument ever could. Asterisk. By the third day, the mood inside the house had changed. At first, her family treated his silence like a small victory. They joked about how quickly he gave up. They assumed he would come back soon, confused and apologetic, ready to accept whatever terms were placed in front of him. But as the hours turned into days, that confidence began to crack. No replies. No explanations. No emotional messages. Nothing. His wife checked her phone constantly. She told herself he just needed time. Still, something about the silence felt different. It wasn't hurt. It wasn't anger. It felt final. One afternoon, she received a message that made her stomach drop. It wasn't from him. It was from someone who handled paperwork, short, professional, polite. It mentioned documents, boundaries, and a request for communication to go through proper channels going forward. No insults, no accusations. Just clarity. Her family gathered around as she read it aloud. At first they laughed. "He's bluffing," one of them said. "He's trying to scare you," another added, but beneath their words, unease spread. They hadn't expected structure, they had expected emotion. Meanwhile, he continued his life quietly. He went to work, he slept better. He ate regular meals. The noise that once filled his head slowly faded. In its place came focus. He began setting limits, not out of bitterness, but necessity. He stopped answering late-night calls. He stopped reacting to guilt-filled messages. He refused to explain himself over and over. For years he had tried to prove he was good enough. Now, he was simply being fair to himself. The shift was subtle, but powerful. Back at the house, tension grew. Her family started arguing among themselves. Some questioned whether the Christmas announcement had been the right move. Others insisted it was still the best decision, but doubt had entered the room. His wife felt it deeply. She began remembering moments she had ignored. Times he stood quietly while others spoke over him. Times he swallowed frustration to keep peace. She had mistaken his calm for weakness. Now she saw the cost. One evening, she sat alone in the living room, the same place where the divorce papers had been handed to him. The tree lights were still up, but they felt cold now, empty. No laughter. No applause. Just silence. She typed a message carefully, choosing her words. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that." Minutes passed. No response. That was when she understood something important. She no longer controlled the conversation, and that scared her. At the same time, consequences began appearing quietly. Plans changed. Expectations shifted. Things that were once assumed were suddenly uncertain. Her family realized how much he had been handling behind the scenes. Things they never noticed because he never complained. The support they thought was endless wasn't, and still he said nothing. Publicly. No posts. No explanations. No defense. His restraint unsettled them more than anger ever could. He wasn't trying to win an argument. He was reclaiming his life. By the end of the week, the laughter was gone. The cheering felt distant, almost embarrassing, and the question that now lingered in their minds was one they never expected to ask. What if they had pushed the wrong person too far? Because the man they thought they broke wasn't falling apart. He was standing taller than ever, and soon, the truth he carried quietly would leave them with nothing left to say. The first real crack appeared during a family meeting. They gathered in the same house again, sitting in the same seats, but the energy was completely different. No jokes, no laughter. Everyone spoke carefully now, choosing words like they were walking on thin ice. His name came up again and again, not in mockery. In concern. Her family had begun to realize something they never noticed before, how much he had quietly handled without asking for recognition. Things that stopped working were suddenly problems. Those that were never late now required attention. Plans that depended on his reliability were falling apart. It wasn't dramatic. It was inconvenient, and that made it real. His wife listened silently, her hands folded in her lap. Each comment felt heavier than the last. She remembered how confident everyone had been on Christmas Day, how sure they were that everything would go their way. Now, no one sounded sure of anything. That night, she finally asked to meet him, not to argue. Not to accuse, just to talk. They met in a quiet public place. Somewhere neutral. Somewhere calm. When he walked in, she almost didn't recognize him, not because he looked different, but because he carried himself differently. His shoulders were relaxed, his expression steady. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't desperate. He was composed. They sat across from each other in silence for a moment. "I didn't think it would end like this," she said softly. He nodded. "Neither did I." She looked down. "I didn't expect you to leave like that." He paused before responding. I didn't expect to be laughed at. The words weren't sharp. They were honest. She swallowed. There was no argument she could make against that. She tried to explain the pressure she felt. The voices around her, the constant opinions, the feeling that she had to choose sides. He listened without interrupting. Then, when she finished, he spoke calmly. I spent years choosing peace, he said. I just didn't realize how much of myself I was giving up to keep it. Her eyes filled, but he didn't comfort her. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. She asked if there was any way to fix things. He didn't answer right away. For the first time, she felt what he had felt for years. Uncertainty. I don't know, he said finally. Right now, I need to be fair to myself. That was when it truly hit her. This wasn't about punishment. This was about boundaries. When they stood to leave, she reached for his hand, then stopped herself. He noticed, and for the first time, she understood how many times he must have felt the same hesitation. Back at the house, her family waited for news. She didn't give them what they wanted. She didn't blame him. She didn't defend them. She simply said, "We were wrong about him." The room went quiet. Some looked away, others stayed silent. No one argued because deep down, they knew it was true. The man they dismissed had responded with dignity. The man they humiliated had refused to become what they expected, and the realization settled in slowly but firmly. They hadn't broken him, they had revealed him, and now, the final outcome rested not on anger or revenge, but on the strength of someone who had learned his worth. Asterisk. The weeks that followed were calm, not easy, but calm. The noise that once surrounded his life slowly faded. There were no dramatic confrontations, no public arguments, no attempts to win sympathy. Just steady steps forward. He focused on his routine, work, health, rest, things he once placed last now came first. The divorce moved forward without chaos. Conversations stayed short and respectful. Decisions were made carefully, without emotion leading the way. For the first time in a long while, he felt in control, not of others, but of himself. That alone changed everything. His wife noticed it too. She stopped sending long messages. She stopped asking for explanations. Instead, she observed quietly, realizing how much she had taken for granted. Not just his support, but his presence, his consistency. His calm. There were moments when regret surfaced, but regret, he knew, could not undo choices, and he wasn't bitter. He simply understood something now that he hadn't before. Love without respect slowly disappears. Her family kept their distance, not because he demanded it, because they longer knew how to face him. The same people who laughed on Christmas Day avoided eye contact now. Conversations became cautious. The confidence they once carried was gone. They had expected him to fall apart. Instead, he moved on. Quietly. One afternoon, he packed the last of his belongings from the house. He didn't rush, he didn't linger. Each item felt like a chapter closing, not with anger, but acceptance. When he finished, he stood in the empty room for a moment. This was where it had ended, and also where it began. Later, as he drove away, he felt something unfamiliar. Peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on approval. The solid kind that comes from self-respect. Months passed. Life didn't suddenly become perfect, but it became honest. He pursued goals he once postponed, reconnected with parts of himself he had ignored, built routines that supported him instead of draining him. And slowly, without forcing it, he smiled more. As for his wife, she learned lessons of her own. Without the noise of others guiding her decisions, she faced the reality of what had been lost. Not just a marriage, but trust. The cheering on Christmas felt distant now, almost unreal. In the end, there was no dramatic revenge. No moment where he stood above them all, because real strength didn't need an audience. It showed in his restraint. In his growth. In the way he walked away without becoming bitter. And if there was one thing that shocked them all, it wasn't anger. It wasn't payback. It was this. He left with his dignity intact, and that was something no one could take from him.